if you don't respond. Yes. We got one yes. All right. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. All right. We have a special class this evening in honor of this unique period that we are in. You might call this a seasonal special. And honestly, I never talk about this subject except once a year. I have had a tradition the last several years of revealing some of the deeper secrets about Christianity, Christmas, and Yeshu HaNotzri on Christmas and or New Year's. This I have done in the past several years. A subject that, for various reasons, I don't speak about any other time. But as you're going to see, it's not just interesting, it's not just relevant, it is utterly profound, and it is material that truly all Jews need to know, and B'nai Noach need to know. Certainly, B'nai Noach that have been either active Christians in their previous lifetimes, or it really applies to every person living in this society, the entire Western world. It is so Christianized that you even have the Christian term Judeo-Christian, which was created by the Christians. And this, I believe, this material that I'm going to share with you this evening, I believe it is a responsibility of educated B'nai Noach, and particularly B'nai Noach with a spiritual propensity, certainly one who has never been satisfied with the answers that are given in traditional sources. Now, the irony is that what I'm going to be teaching you this evening is coming from the most traditional sources, coming right out of the Talmud, right out of the Mishnah. We're going to be learning a section of what's called Agadita, or Agada. And Agada, this is important to know. And as I have been emphasizing all along, there's no content without context. It's not so much what we're looking at, but where we're looking from. The most difficult thing for a Gentile who's embracing Torah is the process of developing a Yiddish cup, which is the Yiddish expression for Jew think, for the rabbinical and Kabbalistic way of perceiving reality, which is radically different from the Occidental mode as well as from the Oriental mode. But it actually contains elements of both, and yet is more than both. I'm going to be reading to you from an essay that I wrote some years ago, and it's entitled Adam's Lost Yom Tov, the Captive Soul of Christmas. And because in order to develop, to understand what the sages, what our tradition, our living Mosaic tradition is saying, it requires a methodology. You constantly have to be looking at the way you're looking at what you're looking at. And this is called methodology, and it's called conscious learning, which unfortunately is not the way it's normally done, even in the inner Jewish circles. You get it through osmosis. If you're a bright student, you'll pick it up maybe after 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. 1,000 go in and only one comes out. The way that I teach is, and this is how I learned from my Rebbe, it's true only that 1,000 go in, only one comes out, but you have to be that one. And if you don't see yourself as that one, if you don't have the desire, the passion, the craving to be that one, to know the deepest truth about creation and God, then you'll be one of the other 999. So, let's learn a little bit about what Agada is. Within the sea of the Talmud, there are two dimensions to be navigated. One, the halachic material, which deals with the laws, rituals, and the jurisprudence, and comprises the majority of the 60 tractates. The Agada, which is the non-halachic aspect of the rabbinical discussions, comprises over a quarter of the Talmud. The word Agada means telling. Where do we know that word from? Anybody in the cyber audience there knows where that term is used? A similar term, Agada. You can type it in. I'm watching. No takers? Ah, very good. Haggadah, exactly. The famous Haggadah, the Haggadah of Passover, is from the same root, and it means the telling. And so the term used, and there's no translation in English for this, it is unfortunately and tragically translated as the legends of the Jews. These are not legends. These are the deepest secrets of creation. But there's no Agada. It just means the telling, and it refers to all the non-legal material. Now, don't think that the legal material is any less profound. It's just in a different way. One is the left brain of God, and the other is the right brain of God. Agada touches upon virtually every aspect of life and its concerns, none the least of which is the Kabbalah, the inner teachings of the Torah. Many secrets of the esoteric tradition of the sages are strategically embedded throughout the Talmudic tomes and pages of the Midrash. Odd and unbelievable stories, simple aphorisms, archaic medical remedies, astronomical and anatomical observations, and even psychoethical or philosophical messages are systematically used by the Talmudic sages to transmit teachings of the inner Torah. The sages in their commentaries over the last 1,000 years have decoded much of this Agadic material. The close of the Mishnah was in the 2nd century. The close of the Gemara is at the 3rd and 4th, a little bit of the 5th century. Together, the Mishnah and the Gemara comprise what's called Talmud. And once again, Talmud is broken down into two basic categories. Now, there is a category of Agadic material that is dispersed throughout the Talmud and the Midrash, where there is little, if any, commentary. When we say commentary, we're talking about by the great era of rabbinic commentary was in the Middle Ages, beginning in the 12th century. This is the time of Rambam Maimonides, of Nachmanides, Ramban, of Rashi, and literally hundreds of others. And they have commented on virtually every part of the Talmud and Agadita, but there's one category of Aggadic material where there's very little commentary by the great rabbinic masters of the Middle Ages. And why is this? Because this category of Aggadic material deals with Christianity and Yeshu HaNotzri, Jesus of Nazareth. There are numerous references to Yeshu, Christianity, and the collective soul of the Gentile nations throughout the Talmudic material. And the lack of the commentary is due to the threat from the church. When this material was written down, there was no Christianity. When the Christianity became the dominant force, particularly with the Jews that were exiled into Europe, well, a lot of these sections were censored. And they were censored either directly by the church. I have in my possession a tractate of the Talmud that is 250 years old. And in the front piece of the Talmud, the entire page is written in Latin with the stamp of the official Catholic Church censor, declaring that this particular volume is kosher. That's actually what it says. It says, this Talmud is kosher. That there is no, what does that mean? It means that there is no reference in there that may appear to refer disparagingly to Jesus, their God, or to Christians, or to non-Jews. Non-Jews, not ancient non-Jews, but to the non-Jews that were current at that time. We're talking in the Middle Ages. In other cases, the rabbis themselves, knowing what could possibly happen, would censor passages themselves. And sometimes it just amounted to changing a single word. But because there was no censorship of the Talmud in the Arab lands, so we do have extant manuscripts that have the original text, and that's how we know this today.
So is this particular volume you are referring to, do you know the volume number, a reference to that particular Talmud that was kosher?
That one is, it's not, you won't find it today. I happen to have one that's 250 years old.
But you have a reference to that particular one, the 250 years old Torah or Talmud that you're saying you are referring to 250 years old. What is the title of that Talmud?
Oh no, they did it on every one. They did it all. I just happen to have that one volume. That.
Is the whole volume of the Talmud or just one?
No, they did this with every volume. Anything Jews printed was not permitted to be printed unless it went through church censorship. Exactly. This was true with all of them. Now, there's no longer church censorship. And the censored Talmudic and Midrashic text and a few commentaries have been restored. Still, whether by the hand of man or by the hand of heaven, many Jewish esoteric teachings concerning Christianity remain closed to outsiders. This is due to the highly volatile nature and the potential misunderstanding and abuse of the subject by Christians and by some Jews as well, particularly secular Jews who would use this material to actually attack and mock the rabbis who represent traditional Jewish religious observance. And it could even be by well-meaning Jews that did not understand, because it really requires initiation, as we're going to see. However, the Gaon of Vilna, the famous sage from 250 years ago, is known for his statement regarding our present generations that we are in, when he writes, the final redemption will come through the learning of the Kabbalah. This means in addition, obviously, to Halacha and Talmud and all the other parts that a Jew and or a non-Jew is responsible and required to know. This involves the Kabbalah of the Talmudic Agadah as much as it does the study of the Zohar, the Arizal, and the Hasidic teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. According to this tradition, that the final redemption is dependent upon the additional learning of the Kabbalah, the lost or hidden seeds buried within the written Torah and in the collective rabbinical mind of the oral Torah must sprout and bear fruit. This includes the arcane Jewish teachings concerning Christianity. Anything that the sages wrote down in the Talmud and the other rabbinic sources, it's never simply for historical value. It's never for simple, apologetics. They are encoding profound secrets of creation, and they do it in this particular form because when you can't write down something and it's forbidden to teach something and it requires initiation, well, how do you do it? You do it in a very enigmatic way so that only those that know will know. This is what it means in part. He gives wisdom to those who have wisdom.
They experience it.
So, listen to this. There is a Mishnah in the Talmud. That's actually it's what's called a Braita. A Braita is a parallel Mishnah in a separate connection. It says like this: Amar Rav Chanan bar Rabba. One of the sages said, and this is being written down in the 2nd century, it's coming down from an even earlier tradition, in the tractate called Avodah Zarah, dealing with the practices of ancient idolatry, particularly at the time of the Romans. Jews had to know what the non-Jewish festivals were, in part simply because you weren't allowed to do business the day before the Gentile pagan holidays, because if you do business with them, then they may go back to their god. I got such a great deal, and they're going to pay homage, make an offering, worship their god. And a Jew or a non-Jew is never allowed to be a stumbling block for the blind, as the expression is in Scripture. And so you had to know when were what were their different holidays and when were they observed. So here the text tells us these are the festivals. No, excuse me. This actually is the Mishnah. What I'm going to read to you momentarily is from what's called a Braita. This is the actual Mishnah that was codified by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Judah the Prince, where it says, these are the festivals of the idolaters, kalenda, from whence comes the English word calendar, the new calendar. Kalinda was an ancient Roman pagan festival. Saturnalia, which begins December 17th, ending December 25th. This was an ancient Roman observance long before the advent of Christianity. Now here's the other text. Our rabbis taught, when Adam HaRishon saw that the day getting gradually shorter, he said, Oi, li. Really, that's what it says. It says, Oi, li. Woe is me. Perhaps because I have transgressed with the tree of knowledge, the world around me is being darkened, and returned to its original state of tohu and vohu, chaos and confusion, the primordial worlds. This, then, is the kind of death to which I have been sentenced from heaven. Now, bear in mind, this sounds like a little story that's being told here. This is all still taking place in a higher dimension. Adam wasn't concretized, he wasn't a Homo sapien even yet, even though this is after the fall. And so this is just a stick figure diagram of what this is all really referring to. So the text goes on and says, so he began keeping 8 days fast. But as he observed the winter equinox and noted the day getting increasingly longer, he said, this is the natural way of the world. This is not my punishment. I'm not going to die in this cosmic black hole that's just going to suck me in. What a way to go. Right? That's every astronomer and astrophysicist's nightmare. The fear of falling into a black hole and being stretched to as thin as spaghetti over a distance of infinite light years. Yeah. That's what happens when you fall into a black hole. You become one of those Salvador Dali watches, melting and dripping, but it's your brain and consciousness and your memory of everything that ever was. All right. Moral of the story, stay away from black holes. All right. And so, Adam took it upon himself to keep 8 days Yom Tov. In other words, when he started sensing that this is my punishment, the days were getting shorter and shorter, he started fasting. And after he had fasted 8 days, he realized that now the day was starting to become lighter. And then, to parallel the 8 days of fasting and torment and teshuvah, he was crying, he was screaming, he was bawling his cosmic eyes out. And then the next 8 days, he turned those into days of festivity. Okay? And then, in the following year, it says, he appointed the 8 days preceding and the 8 days following the equinox, he called Yom Tovim. Now listen to this term. The sages here are referring to what these 16 days of Adam is what? Yom Tovim. Yomim Tovim. A Yom Tov. You know what a Yom Tov is? A Yom Tov is the rabbinic terminology for a Chag. A Chag is a Jewish festival. We're talking like Shavuot, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Passover. These are Chagim. This is a very significant term to use. It's not being used loosely. In other words, this is a very high level of the significance to call these 16 days Yom Tov. In fact, this is the common greeting. Yom?
Yom. Oh, like Yom Kippur.
Yeah, exactly. Yom. And this is the greeting on festivals. In Yiddish, it's Gut Yom Tov, or Good Yontif. In Yiddish, it became Good Yontif. But it's from Gut Yom Tov. A good Yom Tov means a good day. Now, the text here in the Talmud concludes by saying, now he, meaning Adam, designated them for the sake of heaven, but the pagans after him took his 16 days, his 16 holy days, and designated them for the sake of idolatry. And you see this right in the word itself. Where does holiday come from? Holy day. You see what the world has done? It's taken holy days and turned them into holidays. Now, Rabbi Hanan ben Rabbah said, calendars kept on the 8 days following the winter equinox, Saturnalia on the 8 days preceding the equinox. Now, there's something strange going on here. And that is the Mishnah lists these, along with, there's a list of other pagan holidays, but it lists this Calenda and Saturnalia in the wrong order. Saturnalia, which morphs into what? Christmas, is listed second, whereas Calendra, which morphs into what? New Year's, January 1st, is listed prior to Saturnalia, in the order of the Mishnah. It's like you're going through the chronology of the holidays, say, that are observed in the Western world, and you list January 1st, New Year's, before Christmas.
Well, maybe it was in January.
No. We know Christmas was, even back then, I'm saying Saturnalia by the Romans, was from December 17th to December 25th. Those 8 days. And the Talmud then says, well, since they're in the back, they're introduced backwards. Just so you won't get confused, here's a mnemonic device to remember them. Now, mnemonic devices in the Talmud are everywhere because there's so much information. The sages teach you, if you don't develop mnemonic devices, I don't care what kind of photographic memory you've got, and they all had photographic memories. They're all child geniuses, child prodigies. But even then, you're dealing with data that is enough to fill up the mind of God. Okay? So you need devices, and so they were always using verses and plays on words in order to remember certain things. Aha, except we're not just dealing here with a team of mnemonic experts. We're dealing here with Jews. And there's always something going on behind the scene when you're dealing with the rabbinical mind, because they're multitasking in multi-dimensions. And their genius is so profound, they're constantly concealing higher dimensional data in the format of lower dimensional data. Case in point, you have a psalm from the book of Psalms, chapter 139, verse 5.
Solomon or Psalm?
Psalms, the book of Psalms. It says, Achor v'kedem tzartan. King David proclaims, back you have formed me, God, from behind and before, meaning you have formed me back and front. Okay? It's a well-known verse. And so the mnemonic device is, just as Adam, and this is King David, but it's also, who's saying this? Adam is saying this, and this is a whole thing in and of itself. That verse has to do with when Adam is saying, you formed me front and back and front. What's he talking about? Because Adam was created as a higher dimensional androgynous being, du partsufim, male and female, back and front and back. His female is his backside, his male is his front side. This is well known in on the Chumash, Rashi's commentary, quoting the Talmudic and Midrashic sources. However, that's what in that verse is used over there. Adam is saying, you formed me a whole reality to my back and a whole reality to my front. But here, it seems that the sages are just using this as a little, almost frivolous mnemonic device, that you put the back before the front, meaning you put January before December, and so remember, you have formed me back and front to reverse the order, so I'll know that chronologically that the Saturnalia comes before the calendar. Question, let's see, if Adam was not a Homo sapien, why was he fasting for the 8 days? I was emphasizing two answers to that. One is that he was not fully a Homo sapien as we are now, certainly not the way that reality became after the Great Flood. And we're just trying to emphasize that Adam's collapse and fall was not simply black and white. It went through various stages and layers. So we could say it was something, in simple terms, something between a Homo spiritus and a Homo sapien. But even aside from that, even there was still, fasting is still a phenomenon even in the higher dimensionality. Remember we talked about all the 613 commandments exist embedded into the higher dimensionality of the Garden of Eden. Likewise, the phenomenon of fasting would also have its spiritual equivalent. What fasting is in the four-dimensional reality, I don't know, and even if I did know, I would not be able to convey that, communicate that to you. What was he fasting from? Oh, he was doing tshuva. The fasting was part of his teshuvah, because remember, he thought that the world, reality, was collapsing in on him. And so he was doing tshuva as a prisoner who was sentenced to death. He knew he had done wrong, and he thought that he might get off with life, but he realized he was getting off with death, and so he was fasting as part of this tshuva process, and only to realize after 8 days of fasting and doing teshuvah that this was the natural way of the world that he had now caused. See, there were no seasons before. Seasons only exist in the fallen, collapsed flatland. In the Garden of Eden, you don't have the waxing and waning of nature and reality. And okay, so those are the two responses to that observation.
So he literally caused by his teshuvah the seasons to separate out.
No, the seasons had already been separated out.
Oh, okay.
His tshuva, he was trying to atone. He knew he could not change the reality of the world, what he had caused, but he was trying to atone for his own personal responsibility and saying, God, give me life sentence, please don't bury me in a cosmic black hole. Now, I have material here that's very fascinating about Saturnalia. If we have time, I'll come back to it. But everybody knows, and this is the basic fact that we need to know here to understand the secret that the sages are teaching us. It's a historical fact that Constantine, the Emperor of Rome, after himself having converted, and we don't know if he converted out of true personal belief or whether he did so for political concerns to now solidify his kingdom under one kind of pseudo-god as opposed to hundreds and thousands of different gods. But after he himself converting, I believe this was in the 3rd or 4th century, he forcibly converted the entire Roman world to Christianity. The pagan Roman Empire became the Holy Roman Empire. This follows the rabbinical and Kabbalistic traditions that Christendom is the spiritual continuation of ancient Rome, and not by coincidence is the Vatican in Rome. The collective soul of Rome, in turn, is the spiritual legacy of Esav. Thus, we have the scriptural equation where it says, Esav hu Edom. Esav is Edom, the traditional name for Rome. It's also an historical fact that Christianity inherited, adopted, and transformed. They Christianized the Roman gods and goddesses, their festivals, convocations, and religious symbols. As mentioned in the Mishnah, the ancient festival of Saturnalia, which began on the 17th of December and concluded 8 days later on the 25th of December, became the modern Christmas. 8 days later, throughout the Roman Empire, they celebrated Calenda, which has become the accepted new calendar day throughout the modern world. It wasn't until the 4th century, however, that the church set Christmas on December 25th, not because they believed that that's when their founder was born, but because they wanted to absorb and Christianize the existing midwinter pagan feast that was a time of drinking and revelry. The English Victorians commandeered the holiday, and Victorian writers helped transform it into a domesticated and much safer type of feast. It was imported to America and has evolved into the worship of the gods of materialism and the feast of cash registers. Cling, cling. Yeah, and this is what the sages stated. Now, Adam designated them for the sake of heaven, but the pagans designated them for the sake of idolatry. Hmm? No, not directly. The modes of idolatrous worship during Saturnalia are very interesting, especially how they, and even more ancient pagan practices, have been transformed into Christmas and New Year's. Practices and beliefs with idolatrous roots include the rituals of mistletoe, the Yule log, decking the halls, gift-giving, gift-giving, the three wise men, Santa Claus, and the ubiquitous Christmas tree. To what extent Christians have continued to designate them for the sake of idolatry or not is an important question. The permissibility or not of a Gentile or a Noahide observing Christmas and New Year's and their rituals is a very complicated halachic legal matter, and it's dealt with in the halacha in Jewish law. The purpose here, however, is not a critique or judgment of Christianity and its festivals. So I want to make that very clear. We're taking a very different approach. We're going to peel away the outer veneer and show you something that, to my knowledge, has never been made public. And what I'm sharing with you is almost virtually unknown in Torah circles, even though it is clearly stated in the Mishnah and in the Gemara. But it often happens, certain things, if their purpose is not to come out, they don't come out until the right time. Seeds are planted. The ancient sages knew these things. But when this was written, truly, there wasn't even Christianity. They're talking about the Romans. But reality is fractal. And we see the legacy continues. The same principles and essences are there, playing themselves out. Now, rather, our objective here is to glimpse an extraordinary Torah perspective of Christmas. And initially, this can appear bizarre and paradoxical. And it does require the penetrating mind of one who can mevin midato. That means understand on one's own. The rabbis also admonish us not every mind can handle this. And we're not going into the full scope of Christianity and Christmas. We're just going to zero in on one pivotal point here. And if you get it, you get it. And if you don't, then you have to wait till next year. The short account of the world's original Yom Tov. Now get this. This is the records of the very first festival that any human kept. This is Adam's first Yom Tov.
Historical name Adam, the Adam you've been referring to constantly, is that a historical figure in that?
Adam Harishon, the first man.
Oh.
Adam and Eve.
So you're referring to that Adam?
Yes, that's the Adam. Now,
the beginning of us, mankind. Oh.
yes, and so this is the first observance, as it were, of humanity, of Adam, and it's called a Yom Tov. Now, this is based simply on the historical development. There's a logical connection. Adam's original 16 days of Yom Tov had an intrinsic relationship to Saturnalia and Calenda, right? Which in turn have an intrinsic relationship to Christmas and New Year's, okay? That's real obvious. It's like a simple syllogism. Therefore, Adam's Yom Tovim have an intrinsic relationship to Christmas and New Year's. Who would think? You realize this is a Talmudic source for Christmas before there was even Christianity. Christmas and the Gentile New Year have their roots in the original observance of Adam HaRishon. Not only that, but the rabbis refer to them as Yom Tov. And as we said, that's a very, very special term. And so it comes out, what are you talking about? That Christmas, at its root, is a Yom Tov? And what will the nature of Christmas be in the Messianic era? There is another side to the story. In order to understand the other side to the story, we have to understand a very profound principle that is throughout the whole Kabbalah and truly the whole Torah. And that's what that picture is up there. Does anybody recognize that shape? That's a Mobius strip. Okay, what is a Mobius strip? It's very simple. It's just a strip of paper that normally is connected to form a cylinder. If you cut it and you disconnect it and you make one twist in it and reconnect it with some Scotch tape, then you have what is in geometry or in topology known as one surface with two sides. Because if you walk along and draw a line along one side, you will end up on the other side without ever having lifted your finger or pen off of the paper. This is not an optical illusion. This is a fact. It was discovered by a mathematician who, no surprise, his name was Augustus Ferdinand Mobius. And therefore, he is famous for all throughout history as the one who described the mathematical properties of a Mobius strip. Two sides, one surface, or one surface, two sides. This is really important, and you see, this is something that we're going to come back to again and again all the time, because you know what? You can't understand at all what God is about from a Torah perspective if you don't understand the basic Mobius strip. Because you know what the Torah is saying when it says Einod? There's nothing here other than God. There's just one unity that's manifesting itself in two modes. And they're both sharing, as it were, the same side. Now, the Torah teaching of the fallen sparks. Okay, this you also have to know. That everything in creation, including the forces of evil, have concealed within itself, in essence, a spark of divinity. These are called in Hebrew nitzot sot. And truly the better term is a fractal spark. It's a much more sophisticated way of describing. Sparks always sounds a little too oversimplified. It is the spark of spiritual purity that sustains and enables every person, place, or thing to exist and act. In the case of evil, however, the spark of God's light is, so to speak, taken captive by the Sitra Achara, the external elements. Sitra Achara literally means the other side. And that's why it's a double entendre when we're now talking about the other side of the story. It has two meanings. The divine spark, and it's taken captive by the external elements. These are the corporeal shells, the klipot, and the cosmic viruses that are called the El Acher, the other god, and the Elilim, the little gods. These are viruses. The divine spark, in effect, is infected and forced to host the invading element as it commandeers its life force and uses that life force to empower and propagate itself and to impersonate the true source of its life. Very important term. The other side is a virus. It commandeers the host and it impersonates the host and says, what? I'm the real cell. I'm the real life force. I'm the real human. I'm the real thing. This is the basic idea of what this is about. Although the mathematical-like details of this concept fill up volumes, okay, this is just the principle, and as it applies, this is the advanced study of Lurianic Kabbalah. There remains, however, an important question. When the sparks of divinity fall, that is, when they collapse into lower reality, how do they fall? In other words, along what geometry or topological surface do they adhere? You understand this? Everything is based upon underlying patterns. Nothing just falls. Even when a diamond breaks, it's falling along specific fault lines that can be mathematically described. Study of crystals, Christology, and so forth. And the answer to this question is in the very formula contained in the verse supplied by Rabbi Hanan ben Rabbah when he said, "You have formed me back and front." Ostensibly, using a scriptural verse as an aid to remember the plethora of oral teachings. Remember, at a time when it was forbidden to write down the oral teachings, they had to always be using mnemonic devices, as we mentioned. Notwithstanding, the sages also used mnemonic devices to transmit secrets of the Torah. The rabbinical art of concealment is obvious in this case, because why would we need a mnemonic to remember the relatively simple matter of the order of 2 pagan festivals? Give me a break. And additionally, why don't you just put them in the right order to begin with? Although this question has been addressed by the classical commentaries, it appears that the masters of the Mishnah are also teaching us a hidden aspect contained in these 2 time periods. The verse, "Back and front you have formed me," is a terse equation written in symbolic notation, which contains a great deal of information. One is the topological concept of opposites, or it's known as the law of parallelism. There's another axiom that all of the Kabbalah and therefore all of Torah is based upon. It comes from Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, where King Solomon says, God has set one thing parallel to the other. Ze le'umat ze asa ha'elokim. God has set one thing parallel to the other. In other words, King Solomon here is teaching us the axiom that God has constructed all existence upon an appositional relationship. You notice I did not say the word oppositional, I said the word appositional. What is the difference? This is known as the sod of opposites, but really it's the sod of opposites. What is something that's appositional? It means when you place 2 things beside each other, next to each other, they're appositional to each other. They are not truly opposites. Our 2 hemispheres are not opposites to each other. They're really appositional to each other. However, these terms, that's the problem. The terms opposites, mirroring, parallel, they're insufficient for the Torah's conception of the relationship between these parallel forces, whatever we are discussing, because this term applies, this concept of this against this has God set up, it applies in a myriad of different applications. The law of parallelism is not simply 2 sides of the same coin. A coin representing a single reality has 2 distinct surfaces or geometrical planes. If these 2 planes were infinitely extended, they would exist as 2 parallels, yet never the twain shall meet. The surface of a Mobius strip, however, is very different, as we just discussed. Even though all that is involved is that simple twist, both in the topology of the strip and in the topology of the mind, you're twisting, this is the key here. Just like you twist that little paper, you make a little twist in your consciousness. This is how you learn to think like a Jew. How to think like the rabbinical mind. And yes, you cannot be a Kabbalist, but you can learn to perceive reality and get an appreciation of the utter profundity of the depths of the rabbinical Kabbalistic mindset, which has been the modus operandi and the very animating life force of the Jewish nation for 4,000 years. Appearing paradoxically but physically true, a Mobius strip has 2 surfaces but only one side. That is, it's a single reality that extends into 2 modes of its own essence. Using the Mobius strip model, we can better understand that the Torah designations of front and back do not refer to opposing or even mirror opposites, because there are no opposites in Torah. Never. That's a Goyish concept. particularly in the Western. See, in the Eastern, there's no opposites because there's nothing. Period. It's just an absolute oneness. There's just a singularity. And in the Occident, the West, you have duality, strict duality. If A, not B, if B, not A. And in the East, it goes, what is A? What is B?
But why thinking of it in a Kabbalistic way, then you don't have that.
Exactly, because you're never working on a normal surface structure. You're always working on a Mobius strip structure, and this is just the beginning, simple model. The models become more complex as we go deeper. But in any event, rather, when the Torah says front and back, when King David says in the book of Psalms, you formed me front and back, and that's Adam saying that, they're not talking opposites. Rather, they refer to a dual, unified reality that exists in an inverse relationship with each other. There is only one singular side that, depending upon how it is designated, is being turned inside out or outside in, as it oscillates between its concave and its convex surface. The inside is equivalent to the face or front, and the quote-unquote outside is equivalent to the back or the behind. This new understanding now reframes the formula. He has formed me back and front and reveals an unexpected relationship between the subjects, namely Adam's Yom Tov and Christmas. Saturnalia and consequently Christmas are back to back with each other, or more accurately, back to front with the Adamic Yom Tov. These two festivals, however, are not opposites. In other words, they're not in opposition to each other. Rather, there is only one side that has two surfaces, a front or a face and a back. And this is in the mystery of the verse. He has formed me back and front. Everything is, that's the Mobius strip talking. If you were a Mobius strip, what would you say? He's formed me front and back, and my front and my back is really just two modes of my own self. And if I stay in my backside long enough, I'll end up in my front side and vice versa. The front side is the original face, whereas the back side is just that, the backing for the face. You see how they're not equal? One is the real, as it were, the painting, and the other is the backside that is forms the substance, the structure, the fabric that the painting is being projected onto. Yet, because there's only one unified reality, meaning one side, two junctions in time, meaning the festivals, right? What are festivals? Festivals are vortices in time. And time has a front and a back too. Space has a front and a back. Human has Olam Shana Nefesh, world, space, and soul. Each one is going to have its respective front and back and front and back. Everything has its backside, which will, what does the backside do? It attempts to replicate or mimic qualities of the face. When the pagans, so here's the text of the Gemara. When the pagans appointed them for the sake of idolatry, what this means is that they inverted the sacredness of the Adamic Yom Tov, causing those holy sparks to, quote-unquote, fall into their own backside. Simply put, Christmas is the backside of Adam's Yom Tov. Adam's Yom Tov is not the true face of Christmas. Adam's Yom Tov is the true face of Christmas. The soul of Adam's Yom Tov has become captive in the spirit of Christmas. And here we're using spirit, obviously, as a double entendre. The world thinks it's the spirit of Christmas in a good way. Here it is spirit in a negative sense. The spirit of Christmas has now been turned inside out to reveal, in mind-boggling cosmic irony, an immense spark of holiness hidden at its center that belongs to who? Who does Christmas really belong to? When it is removed, when its alien garments are removed, and it's inverted from its backside into the front side, when it's what has become concave. You see that concave? It falls into a cave. When that is inverted to become convex, that is Adam's original Yom Tov. That's been sitting around for thousands of years, waiting to be redeemed. And it's in pain. Adam is, his Yom Tov is crying out every single year at this season. Look what those Goyim did to me. Look what, it wasn't enough that the pagans turned me in to Avodah Zarah, idol worship, the Saturnalia, the god of Saturn, and so forth. Look what these modern Gentiles did to me. The commercialization and the materialism, the consumerism.
That's real.
That's really in the klipa.
Idolatry.
Yeah, but you know what? In one sense, it was better. The idolatry before was better because at least they knew it had to do with their gods. We've lost that.
Yeah.
In one sense, it's better to have a non-Jew, a Christian, who believes in God, even if it's a distorted view. It's a 3-in-1 or a 1-in-3, than to speak with a outright atheist. And so here you have atheists and agnostics and people that don't really have a connection to spirit or spirituality at all. Millions are worshiping Christmas. And by the very act of the worship, it's not something that's innocuous. It's not just, it doesn't matter what, no. By the very observance, they're holding part of Adam's essence, his original Yom Tov, which is part of the tikkun of the world. They're holding it in captivity. And it's crying and screaming out.
I wonder why our Akan people of Ghana, and you can, I think it might be even online as to how we celebrate Christmas. The 25th, the real Christmas Day, it's mourning day in Ghana. It's like you use that day to mourn every family member that might have died within the year.
On Christmas?
On the 25th, yeah. It's almost like...
Was this before Christianity came to Ghana?
Yeah, this was after Christianity came, and I think we resisted it by socialization.
That's very interesting. They turned it into a day of mourning.
Not any family member who
all right.
might have lost
Let me just finish the concept here. As the history of the world draws closer to its grand conclusion, we are beginning to hear the echoes of the rabbinic formula, Baruch Matir Asurim. Blessed is the one who releases those that are bound and held captive. In the Messianic era, the mitzvah commandment to redeem the captive, which is one of the holiest and most vital mitzvahs of the Jewish people for millennia, and that is the responsibility to redeem a Jewish captive at all costs. It takes on an additional significance. The sages of the Talmud are teaching us that even the captive soul of Christmas will be redeemed and returned to its original and rightful owner. In the higher messianic dimensions, Adam's lost Yom Tov will shed its alien garments and be resurrected and reunited with the collective soul of the nation of Israel and all humanity. And I will add that B'nai Noach that have been personally involved in Christianity, if only because that's how they grew up, and they don't know anything else, but they who have rejected the Christian tradition, they have, if they feel and see the calling, they have the ability to help redeem Adam's Yom Tov by not throwing out the proverbial baby with the bathwater, and not just rejecting it black and white, because it can be sickening and it's ridiculous and it's all those associations. But there's something alive and kicking in there that needs to be released. and a Ben Noach who is in the mystery of Klipat Noga, the aura emanating out of the body of Adam, the skin of Adam. They're in between Jew and non-Jew. They have the ability to redeem that which is redeemable from their Christian past, from their observance of Christians, and from other Christians around them, their neighbors, their family. But with a simple twist of the mind, a simple twist of the Mobius strip structure of reality, they can become an active participant in the messianic redemption of the 70 nations of the world and all of that which is associated with them.
Oh, that's what I'm going.
That's right. And I go, oh, so that's what I'm supposed to do at this time of the year, you know? Because it's a very awkward thing for Noachides, you know, because you're nishtahin, nishtaher. That's Yiddish, means you're not a chicken, you're not a hare. I mean, you're not a rabbit, you're not a hare.
Not chicken or an egg.
You're right. Nishtahin, nishtaher. Nishtahin. No, man actually means a chicken. But because, you know, it's like, well, you're not Jewish, so you don't do the things completely. You're not a Gentile completely anymore. This is a new no man's land, but it's not new. This is all going back to Adam. That's why this course is entitled The Body of Adam. You're on the front lines. You're in the army now.
The awareness.
It's so interesting that we spend almost the whole day trying to unravel all this kind of suppression of other traditions and spirituality by the main organized religion.
It's like exactly
Focus
the same
on
thing.
how much they can crush
Yes.
the goddess in our women,
Yeah.
and how much they will make them feel like temptation of the flesh and the serpent, the evil, rather than the goddess that we worship, you know. And then we came with the analogy of bush fowls, two bush fowls.
The what?
Two bush fowls.
Bush fowls?
Yeah, fowls in the bush. They are very territorial birds. You go to meet on the farm or the farmer after the farmer has left the farm.
Yeah.
And each, the group in social groups. So one set of bush fowls go to meet another set of bush fowls on somebody's farm. They fight the whole night. Meanwhile, the farm doesn't belong to any one of them.
If anyone has any questions, go ahead and type them in. And I realize that for some of you listening, you've probably never heard anything like this. And it is something that I myself spent many decades investigating and developing my understanding of it based upon the principles of the deeper teachings of the Torah, of the Kabbalah. And it's something that, as I said, I return to once a year for the benefit of Jews and righteous Gentiles as well. As you see, it's important to know what's going on behind the scenes. And this is part of the mitzvah of unifying God, of knowing that there's only one is. We say there's ein od. That means there's nothing else here. There's no duality. There's a profound singular duality, or a dual singularity, and that's in the mystery of the model of the Mobius strip. And likewise, the same thing here. This is astounding. Christmas, the thing you think the most farthest away from anything Torah. And here it is being discussed in the Gemara, and lo and behold, it's directly connected, the very backside of Adam himself. So this is very relevant for B'nai Noach to be aware of, because they are in the middle, and they have that ability to redeem the sparks of what's called Noga, which is the area in between. And they can do certain redemption that even Jews will not be able to do directly in most cases. Of course, if there was a Jew that grew up as a Christian or converted, God forbid, to Christianity, when that Jew wakes up and does his tshuva, he's going to be bringing home the sheaves too. All together now, ready? Bringing in the sheaves. And I said that, I did that intentionally because you know what that song, that's from a psalm. And you know what that psalm is about? You know what those sheaves are? That are planted with tears, but and reaped in joy. Those are the holy sparks. Those are the fractal sparks that have all fallen and collapsed from the time of Adam. And we're picking them up. The nation of Israel's been on. What was just asked? What was just asked? I just asked if you had any questions, and then Ray is asking, where do I get an instruction manual? It's called the Bible. It's the Torah. The Torah is the instruction manual. It's just one of those kind of manuals you don't really ever want to get that comes along with the toy that you got to put together, because it takes a long time to understand it. But Baruch Hashem, we can understand it. That's only because we have manuals for the manuals for the manuals, and that's how the rabbinic tradition works. I'm only able to understand and share these things because of my teachers, the living and are from the written tradition, that I'm able to understand and share these things as well. All right, folks. Is there any other questions? So I wish you and bless you in the aura of the residual lights of Hanukkah. And we didn't even go into a whole nother story here. I forgot to tell. It says in another Gemara, it gives one brief passage about the history of Hanukkah. Okay, saying that Hanukkah was about the miracle of the oil and so forth. And at the end it says that the next year, a following year, that the sages, the Hasmoneans, instituted the 8 days as the 8 days of Hanukkah. The terminology used, listen to this, when it says the following year they instituted them and made them Yamin Tovim, the very same terminology that the sages use in referring to the original Adamic festivals of Adam. You see what they're telling us? It's a code. They're telling us, in addition, why is it that there are 8 days of Hanukkah? It's going back not just to the 8 days of the Hasmoneans. There's a fractal pattern here that goes back to Adam. And the fact that Hanukkah is on the 25th of Kislev and Christmas is on the 25th of December, hey, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to know there's something profound going on here. It's one surface that is fracturing and fractaling in concave and convex. We have a question here. How did Adam observe this Yom Tov? Hanukkah is also redeeming Adam's Yom Tov. Yes, absolutely. Hanukkah is also redeeming because you see it's the resonance. You can call it harmonic resonance. It's resonating on the same frequency, the 8 and the 8. The 8 days came out because of Adam's 8 days, and Adam's 8 days also is fractaling that which precedes it and precedes it and precedes it. There's nothing here but one self-replicating pattern that fractures in all these different ways. And how did Adam observe this Yom Tov? Oh, it says he designated the first 8 days and the second 8 days as days of festivity. The text tells us here is that he just instituted them as Yamim Tovim. Doesn't indicate how he celebrated them, but we can imagine the simple basic thing is Hallel and Hoda'ah, praise and thanks. Praise and thanks is the essence. And Alan and Eileen said, thank you for the great class. Very fitting just after the Xmas madness that is all around us. Yes. And we're not done with it. You see, we're still in it. It goes up till January 1st. And of course, you're aware of the absurd irony of fractal history, that according to Christians, right, their God is born on the 25th. What are they rejoicing 8 days later about? That's his circumcision. That's the circumcision of baby Jesus. And in fact, in Catholic liturgy, if I'm not mistaken, certainly in Episcopalian liturgy, in the old liturgy, if you look at in their little prayer book that goes in chronological order, it literally lists January 1st as the festival of the circumcision of baby Jesus. And make the blinking lights go away. Yeah, it's see, those lights that are blinking, that's the residual inverted backside of Adam's Yom Tov. And unfortunately, they will keep blinking until they're fully redeemed. Those lights are calling out. They're saying, "Save me, save me." All right, folks. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week.
They're waiting for a steady state.
Okay. Laila Tov.